Okay, to continue with this, so the first sections are very, very essential. They are very concise, so if we just quickly run through these sessions, usually your background to your research problem is no more than 2 pages. Okay, it's condensed. Your problem statement section or statement is also usually no more than 2 pages. So it's very condensed, but there can be hundreds of in-text references in those. Your rationale significance is usually no more than half a page. Okay, it's not very long. Your aims and objectives is a paragraph. Very, very short, as you can see. That's all it is, and this is in a big font size. So if it's font size 11, it's just a fifth of the page. And your research questions also is just, as you'll see, short. So it adds up all to maybe 5 or 6 pages, these sections. But they are the absolutely essential for your research proposal. And if those sections are good, I pretty much know your literature review and your methodology and everything else will probably be fine. But if there's big problems in those areas, then it carries through. So the longest part of your proposal is your literature review. Okay, and I've showed you already how to search for information. And in a proposal, generally 5 pages to 10 pages. I like to go longer. So my poor master students, I make them do 30 pages. And then, because I want them to work out all the headings for their thesis already. So I want them to read widely enough for the proposal that when they get to their thesis, they're just expanding on this. They already know what goes where, and they've got all the subheadings. But if you do 5 to 10 pages, it's not possible. Your subheadings for your literature review and your thesis could be 5 pages already. Oh, you with me? Just your subheadings can be 5 pages if you list it in the table of contents. If it's really a big research, but generally 2 to 3 pages of subheadings. So I've seen some proposals where they have 3-4 pages of literature, but they've taken it from 5 articles. That's not a literature review. Okay, when my students do it, I make them do 30 pages, and then we submit the proposal. I get them to cut it down to 10, and then those 10, you must know, are jam-packed with information. If to cut something down to smaller, it improves the quality. So if you haven't read enough, it will quickly become discernible in your literature review. So what does it include? It includes a review of books, journals, papers, government documents, newspaper articles, online sources. Generally you want more reputable sources. So the lion portion of your literature should come from journal articles and theses. And it could be government documents, but it should not just come from everyday online sources. Okay? Very important that you cannot have your whole literature review from Biz Community. A majority of the sources, and a lot of journals, when you try and publish your articles, they don't want any internet sources. All they want is journal articles. So journal articles should be the greatest proportion, as well as theses, but there's not as many theses. So journal articles should probably be 70% of your content. Okay? Then we know that your literature will be of a good quality because these journals are peer-reviewed. So what is the purpose? Obviously, it won't be the same for every topic. So if there's no academic research done on your topic or little, then obviously you can't have as many journal articles. But generally in these days, there are very few areas where there's no research. Then you take the next closest area to your research, and you find journal articles on that relates in some way. So the purpose of the literature review is to show that you're acquainted with past and current research. Operative word, current research. So as I say, when I review theses, I see, are all the sources 5 years old? Then I have a big problem, because I will go and do a search. And I will send them a list of 20 journal articles and say, why aren't these included in your research? Because if I can find it, why couldn't they find it? So recent sources, you work your way from most recent to old, not from old to most recent. Very important. Prove that the thesis will not duplicate past or current research. So you can say the following theses were found and they did this and this and this, but why is your research different from theirs? But in order to do that, you need to have found those theses. So go and search on SARBInet current completed research. It doesn't matter if it duplicates an overseas thesis. Why? Because it wasn't done here. So they say that research should be done in other countries, and you use the same model they've used, but it's done in a different country, that's fine. Because it's a mandate, that's a gap. They're saying there's a gap, more research should be done in other countries. But it does matter if it's done in this country already, then you can't do it. Indicate how the research relates, is similar or different to past research. So and then positions your research within the body of knowledge by citing general literature and theory. So you also need to give all the information, but then you also need to show the model that you're using, the theoretical underpinning. So what model is your research based on? Other section, very important, the literature review should be from broad to specific. I'll show you an example later. Broadly comprises of this following section. So the background, industry in which the research is located, an overview of the actual topic, past and current research, and then theoretical framework. So you start broad. So I don't know what example I've given you here. Okay, no, I haven't given you. There's a full example of literature review headings in the notes that accompany this PowerPoint. I just didn't want to put it in the PowerPoint. So I'll email you the PowerPoint, but I'm going to email you the notes that show you a broad. I can quickly just go into the. So if I go into this, then what I've done is here is an example. I will just make this a bit bigger. I want to go to view, zoom, just make this a little bit bigger. So just to show you, this is the literature review from my master student. So we started with the industry, mobile, usage, and then all the different areas, background, definition, history, usage, growth. Then, so that's broad, mobile. Then he makes it more specific, mobile marketing. And mobile marketing, definition, background, legislation, types, usage. But then within, so he's gone mobile marketing, even more specific, mobile apps. Now he's getting to his actual topic. Mobile apps and mobile shopping apps, background, history, types, etc., etc. Then even more specific to mobile apps is marketing communication on mobile apps. Can you see how it's gone from broad to specific? Then after he's done that, he goes to the advertising, he goes to millennials, because who's he doing the research about? Millennials. So he needs to give context. From millennials, he goes to now his models, consumer attitudes and models, so technological acceptance model and the different constructs he's going to use. And then from there, he goes to a conceptual framework or current research. So these are all the theses, the surveys, the journal articles that did research. He now puts them and sets them out, usually in a table even, and I'll show you how to do that. So you can see he's gone from broad to specific, who his target market is, then the model he's going to use. Does that lay a firm foundation? Yes. And you can see how many headings he's got. If you look at all these headings and you put them one after another, it's 3 pages. In your proposal, you need to have those headings already. but you can't put all of it in. And so instead of having all the subheadings, all that you will have in your proposal is this broad heading, mobile usage. And underneath it, you'll discuss all of this together. But when you get to your thesis, you now need to separate it. So I make my students use all of these headings in an expanded literature review, then condense it for the proposal, and then when they're done with the proposal, then they've got the headings, then they can just expand on it. But most people don't. Instead, they just let people talk about mobile usage, and they don't make the students get all of that first. And then obviously, who's going to be the better quality? Obviously my students, because they've read. I force them to read much wider so that they're ready. So when my students are done with their proposal, I make them go and do the research immediately. I don't make them go and do the literature review chapters because they've already done them. Are you with me? They've already got them. So once they've done the research and know their findings, then they know exactly what they need to add. Okay, but I do it differently to others, but it works for me. So that's just to illustrate this. Add your own critical voice. So after each section, you need to say how this literature relates to your research. It's not just cutting and pasting other information. You need to put your own voice. So how does this section relate to your research? You need to continually add your own voice, and your voice forms the intellectual debate. Continually affirm how this study will contribute or fit in with your research problem. So keep drawing back each bit of literature, each page or each paragraph, draw it back to your research. Do not cut and paste entire sections of articles, that's plagiarism. And Turnitin will kill you. Turnitin will pick this up. But what you can do is reference, paraphrase, and combine with other sources and add your own voice. So take 10 sources, put them together, mix it up, use synonyms, paraphrase, add your own voice, your Turnitin will be 0%. But I do not allow my students to give one paragraph from one source. I want to see at least 2, 3, 4, or 5 sources for each paragraph. But you cannot have one paragraph with one source. You need to find 3 or 4 or 5 sources, and then you know that, and mix it up, because then when you run it through Turnitin, there's no problems. But if you've done one source, it's going to kill you. So you need to, and I can show you the comments. You can see that many of them have 8 drafts of their proposal, 10 drafts of their proposal. But I know once they're done with their proposal, they're basically done with most of their literature review and proposal chapter is done. They can just need to add to it after they've done their research. So you need to read, it comes back to that. Be sure to in-text reference all sources. Use the Harvard reference technique, refer to the Harvard for Beginners and Harvard biblical citations, and I've given you the website link here. Although Prof. van Asbjørn, I don't know if you've got it, updated the Harvard for Beginners. And it's called, she only made tiny little changes. The biggest change she made was et al., which I always insisted had to be in italics. And now she's saying it does not have to be in italics. That's the biggest change that there was. So that use that, make sure you get it right. Consult sources that are mainly 5 years or younger. I've already told you that, because but there are classic or foundational sources. So the whole theory that you're using could be 20 years old or 100 years old. So yeah, you've got to reference that. But most of the other sources should be recent. My rule of thumb, as I already mentioned, is 2 recent sources for every older source. So if you have 10 in-text references, at least 6 of them should be recent and the other 4 can be old. So that way you've got a good balance. At least that's just my rule of thumb. Some universities, they will not let you use older sources. Stellenbosch, 5 years, if it's older, sorry, you can't use it. So, that was one of my colleagues' experience. So he had to redo half his thesis because of that. So just make sure that you've got a good balance. Literature review tips. So reflect on the information from studies that have been carried out. What conclusions have these studies reached? Just summarize each study you read. Best place to do that is look at the abstract. That's all you need to look at, and they provide a summary. So that really helps you. Has appropriate literature examined in order to look at the background or rationale of the problem? What are the research gaps I've covered? Does literature provide adequate theoretical framework? Have you reviewed the literature as a perfunctory or mechanical task with no contribution or advancements to the intellectual debate? So this is when you cut and paste everything and you don't put your own voice. You can't. You've got to cut and paste, mix it up, and then add your own 5 cents. How does it relate to your study? What are your thoughts? And then, does the literature correspond with the aims and objectives? Right. Summary of literature. So read, search, read, summarize, paraphrase. That's what I do. So I search, I read it, I cut and paste different things out, I paraphrase it, ready to use. Each journal article, and I'm going to show you what to do. If you summarize one article or thesis a day, you will have 100 in 3 months. Right? Or if you just summarize 2 or 3 a day, and I've been doing about 5 a day now, I had to get through 60, 70 journal articles, and I did it in 2 weeks, because every day I made sure I put aside a few hours to summarize. This is your starting point to the research. Before you've even looked at your topic, is to search for things in your area that's broadly related, read them and summarize them. And I'm going to practically show you how I extract information out of articles for this conference that's coming up. Be sure to include the following in the research methodology section. So these are the things you're going to extract from each journal article. Where the study was conducted, so which country. Why is that important? Because if all the research was done in different countries and not in South Africa, does that strengthen your research? Yes, because there's no research done here, but it's done everywhere else. So that's important. Was it quantitative or qualitative? That's also important. So if everyone's doing quantitative and you do qual, it strengthens your research as well. How many respondents? Well, I always take that down because I always do big research. So I don't stick to 400 respondents. I'll rather have 4,000 respondents. So that differentiates my research. And I explained, Prof. Desar's laughing there, but I explained why. Yeah. Because you have, why do you need more? It's because I understand the statistics. So if you have 4,000 respondents, but now you've got 5 categories, right? So now you've got to divide those respondents between each category. So some category may have 2,000, but the others may only have 400. And then I want to do cross-analysis of those 400. And now you've got 6 or 7 subcategories. How many are in each subcategory now? Now you've got 20, 30. And there must be 30 in each subcategory. So you see, that's why I need big numbers for the research that I do and my poor students do. How many respondents? Who were the respondents? Generation Z, Y, X, consumers or businesses. So that's important. Also include the reference list below here. Include the reference list. So each source you reference immediately. So here's an example of what I do. So I read the article and I in-text reference it, right? I take the main aim of the research, what it was. I take the methodology. So it was conducted in Serbia, it was quantitative, it was 224 respondents, mostly millennials. Why is mostly millennials? Because the students' researchers are millennials, so you want to know. Then you give the main findings of the research. You satisfy. And then you see how I list all the limitations and gaps. So the research, this study was conducted in a developing country, whereas NCOMIS is broadly not used. A quantitative survey was used, whereas longitudinal studies would provide greater depth of information. Cross-analysis of demographic factors such as age and gender would provide useful information since only descriptive analysis is provided. I took this from the research. Are these all research gaps that I can use in my research? Yes. And you do this for each article. Then you do the next one and the next one. And you paraphrase it immediately. So literally, when you're writing your background, you're just cutting and pasting. Because you've already... And you do this for 100 journal articles, man, your research proposal is going to be good. You see? And then what you do is, I'll just show you what I'm busy with as a matter of interest. I don't use all of these headings because I'm not writing a proposal, I'm writing a paper. But this is what I'm busy with right now. And just spent, for this conference that's coming up, I'm busy writing not one paper, I'm actually going to write 3 papers. But just to show you how you can take this a step further. What am I looking for? Doctorate. YouTube, word of mouth articles. So here's my summary, right? So I just make it a bit more author methodology, main findings related to word of mouth or E1. I have a simpler format, but for you guys, you need to go. And then these are all the articles that I've summarized. I mean, that's all recent, all mostly within 5 years. Am I going to have a problem writing my article? Here's all the references, and I in-text reference it in 2 different formats. Because when I'm publishing articles, now you've got 100 references, and now you have to change the format. That's where Mendeley is good. It changes it for you, but I still prefer to do it manually. So here's all my references ready to reference. These are all the articles above that I summarized. You can see it's enough for a thesis already. It's about 60, 70. And then what I do is, out of those articles, I take secondary resources, and this is very important. So when you're reading the article, right, and they quote people, who do you use? Do you use the article you took it from, or do you use the actual people they cited? You use the actual people they cited. You do not take it from your article, because did they say that? No, they're saying what other people said. So when they cite people, you have to cite those original sources. And so you literally take the reference from their reference list. You cannot, when can you cite the article? Only when you take their findings can you cite them. But if you take the information from their literature review and you use it, you need to use the sources they cited. So often there's a lot of nice information, and I cut and paste out the literature review, and look what I do. So these definitions were cited in different articles, but what did I take? I took the people that they used. So I work out headings. So these are the definitions. I cut and pasted out. These came from their introductions, but they were other people what they said. So I cut and paste this out, and I in-text reference it immediately. And then gaps in research. So all of the other people that they said there's a gap. So in their article they said such and such said there's a gap. So who do I in-text reference? Such and such, not them. Because it's not their gap. And then all these gaps, for example, I said, all of these said research should be conducted in other countries. Look how many people I've got. All of those people said research should be conducted in other countries. So what do? I cut and paste that in my background to the research problem. There's about 30 sources. And I say the following peoples, especially the emerging countries. What is South Africa? An emerging country. So that just validates my research immediately. And then the common thing is these people say that only student samples were used, which can't be generalized. So if I have student and non-students in my sample, again, that's a strong point. And these people, for example, said different social media platforms should be used. You see, and these weren't from the actual articles, it was from people they cited. So you could also extract that information. And so these are all my gaps. So it makes it very easy for me to write problem. And then other information I take, and then You see, I reference all of their sources in a separate thing. So below is the articles, and above is these are all the people that they said. And sometimes they don't reference it properly. Then you've got to go and search online. You just put it in Google, and then you'll find what you need. And so this is all ready, and it's all paraphrased. I just cut and paste. You cut and paste your proposal together. You can even take the methodology out that they used. And so you have all your headings, you summarize the articles below. So if I just get through all of that, so you summarize the articles below, and you have the in-text reference in a reference, and above you have all your broad headings for your thesis. And then you cut and paste information out those articles, you use the original sources, and you paraphrase. And just bits of information like that. For my doctorate thesis, this summary for me was 200 pages. And how did I put my doctorate thesis together? I cut and pasted together. Because I paraphrased everything already. And I had my headings already. So I chose what I wanted, and then you mix it up. And there you go. So the key to go back to this PowerPoint presentation is search, find your hundreds of sources, and every day you set aside a time. Maybe at midnight you work best. Some of you work better at 4 o'clock in the morning. And you set aside 2 hours. And in that time should be enough to read and summarize 2 articles. And if you do that over 50 days, it means you've read and summarized 100 articles. And then you've got the in-text referencing, you've got the other sources, and then it just makes it so easy. But you have to do it almost every day. Because each time you stop, you get out of it. So when I stop, and often I have to stop because I always put my students' needs ahead of my own, obviously. Then when you stop, it takes me 2-3 days just to get back into it again. And if I stop for a month, it takes me a week to get back into it. But when I'm into it, every day, then I can summarize 5 articles. Set aside 3-4 hours every day, and then, eventually it's all done. Then you search for new sources, and then once there's no more sources to find, and you've got all these summaries, you cut and paste everything together. But you understand, you've got to do it every day. Right, so summary of main literature sources. Yeah, so this is what I said. You can also extract secondary information from authors from these journal articles, i.e. the authors and sources they use. Place and summarize and paraphrase this section under relevant headings in your proposal. So I've just shown you how to do that. But it's important you always cite the original source. And if you find that someone's citing the same source all the time, go and actually find that article. Because you've got the title, then I just go to Sci-Hub and I cut and paste the title in and bloops. There's the article. So often it's a good way to find others. By looking at their reference lists, you can find other good sources for your research. And while I'm summarizing and I use the source, oh, that's a good source, then I just go to Sci-Hub, cut and paste the title in and get that article, and then you summarize that. So the reference list gives you other sources that you can use. In the final thesis, a much more complete and extensive list will be required. So I'm talking about the literature, the proposal here, but I'm thinking bigger than that. I'm talking about your thesis already. Because your thesis is what? Like 200 pages. So is more extensive. NB referred to the CPT literary research. So I've already discussed that at the beginning. Then you have another section in your proposal called key concepts. So this is a list of basically key concepts in your research. Consider the different key variables in your research title. Be sure to reference each key concept. It's used to provide also a list of abbreviations and acronyms, but commonly used abbreviations you don't have to do, like UK and US. You don't even need to, abbreviate that. It's standard, people know, so don't put that in your list. So that's just a list of all your key concepts and definitions. But these definitions are related to, maybe I'm going to show you an example. Let's just go to someone's proposal. So if we go to this template, it would, literature review, say this, you understand? So there you have your different definitions and acronyms and whatnot, okay, that relate to your research. And your in-text reference each one. So that's important. And okay, now we come into the last big section, is your research paradigm, methods, and methodology. Most people just call this research methodology. But in the FHDC template, it kind of, it splits it up into various sections, which often I would just combine. But I've tried to add some meat to this area specifically because students, besides having to read and summarize articles, methodology is an area that a lot of people struggle with. So it's a cornerstone of the research. It should be succinct in the research proposal, but in the research thesis, you expand on the section to a full chapter. Use multiple research methodology textbooks. Even at BTech, my students can tell you that I make them use at least 5 different research methodology textbooks. Why? Because some books are easy to read and other books are not. And one book may explain something easily, one concept, but then the next concept it doesn't, but another book may. So you need to go to multiple research methodology textbooks to write it. And also, if you just use one textbook for the whole section, well, it's basically amounts to plagiarism. And Turnitin will kill you. So you need to use lots of different books. Also, if you go to the LibGuides website, they give you a whole list of free methodology textbooks. And some of those books are quite good. The first one on the list, Bhattacharya, I use extensively. Bhattacharya. So that link, if you go, there's a whole list. And if you go to Google and you type free methodology textbooks, you'll find lots. And the whole textbooks. And some are good and some are rubbish. But you'll quickly learn those that are easy to understand. Bhattacharya is good. Generally, South African methodology textbooks are written quite in easy to understand language. So good ones are Maree, which is a Van Skyke's book. De Vos, I think it's either Juter or Van Skyke, but Maree and De Vos. Hayden, he's in our department. He's written a few books. His books are easy to understand. Those 3 are very good, and there's some others. But any South African book is very good. And then some of the online books are good, and you can go to the library. There's quite a few. Recently, I've gone there and ordered a whole lot more research books, mainly for my BTech students, because I've got like 80 BTech students, and each of them have to find 5 books. It's problematic. Also, just take note, CPT Library has a lot of online textbooks now. Hey? So if you log into the catalog, you can read them. Instead of taking them out, it's an e-book. You can read it on the computer screen. And I'm sure they've got research methodology e-books as well. So go and search on the library catalog. So how I do the methodology is provide a brief theoretical explanation of each research element and in-text reference, then practically apply it to your study, and then justify why you've selected it and not others. So you say, this is what research sampling is, this is the type of sampling I've selected, and then state why you selected this sampling and not others. Do not include every research element, paradigm, design, sampling. So if you use the convenient sample, do not now talk about random sampling, snowball sampling, systematic. Don't list all of them. You're not writing a textbook. You're only interested in the methodology that you've used. So if there's 20 different types and you use one, you only refer to that one. And you in-text reference it, and then you can justify, we selected this because it was best. When you justify, you may refer to some of the others, but you're not given a theoretical definition of them. So just focus on the methodology that you use. So let's just go through all the different methodology elements. Firstly, the paradigm. So this is a set of common beliefs or agreements that are shared about the sciences about how problems should be understood or addressed. So that's the definition. But generally, I'm just making it very simple for you. If you're doing quantitative research, you're mostly either using a positivist or a post-positivist paradigm. If you're doing qualitative, generally most research is interpretive or post-modernism. So all you do is you give a definition of whatever term you're using, a few different definitions, you apply it to your research, the definition will explain what it is, and then you justify why you've used that. And then you're done with this section. Justify why you've selected the paradigm. Next, research method or approach. So this flows from the paradigm. Generally, the method or approach is either qualitative or quantitative or both. In most instances, it's one or the other. I just thought I'd write a bit about deductive and inductive reasoning here. So usually deductive reasoning is positivist, moves from general to specific to prove a hypothesis. So that would say that it is generally quantitative research. Okay? Inductive reasoning is usually interpretivism, and it moves from specific to general. In other words, to develop a new model or theory. So there's not much known quantitatively. So therefore, that's generally associated with qualitative research. Okay? Define and apply what is relevant to your study. Okay? So research design, generally, it's either descriptive or cross-sectional for quantitative and a do question. Okay, does this happen? Okay? Exploratory, observational, or case study research is generally qualitative, and it is a why question. Why does this happen? And again, you clearly state why you've chosen what you've chosen. So this is just to give you like a framework. And all you need to do is go and look up these terms, find the definitions, in-text reference, apply it to your research, and then justify why you've selected. Sampling, so the population is who is the research population, e.g. units from which the sample will be drawn. So in my student's case, it is students in the Western Cape that he's looking at. Who from the research population will be selected? So now you can break it down further. The sampling frame is the list of sample units. So in his case, it would be CPUT students. He's got a frame of all CPUT students. The sample unit is the basic element that contains the information. So this is mobile shopping app consumers from his example. Sample element is the smallest entity to observe. So this would be a mobile shopping app millennial student user. You see how you can break it up. So that's just an example. Each sampling term needs to be defined and applied to your research. Then sample method, there's two types. There's probability and non-probability. So probability is like simple random sampling. You need a lot of money to be able to do probability sampling. It costs a lot. So most of our students generally use non-probability techniques. Generally convenience, quota, and purpose sampling. So most of my students just use a convenience sample or a judgmental purpose. They select the respondents. Okay? So you need to define the technique you've used. Also, sample size is very important. So if you're doing quantitative stats and you've got a lot of cross-analysis variables, can you choose, like, is 200 respondents enough? It's not going to be, because in each subcategory you need at least 30 respondents. Generally, for quantitative sampling, the magical number is 384, if you statistically work out the size. But I make my students go way beyond that, to the thousands. Okay? Because there needs to be 30 respondents in each category, subcategory. So if you've got 10 age groups and you've got 400 respondents, are there going to be 30 in each of those 10 age groups? No. So can you do cross-analysis then between age groups and your construct? No. So it's very important that you take that into consideration. And my students are fortunate enough that I do all their stats for them. So I advise them right at the beginning that this is how many you need in order for me to be able to do your stats. Qualitative is generally 12 to 20, or 10 to 20, but the concept of saturation applies. So this states that after each new participant you've interviewed, do they provide new information? When you reach the point where they don't provide any new information, this is where you stop. So it could be after 8 respondents, there's no more new information. But it could be that you've interviewed 20, but they keep producing new information. That means you need to do more. So that's the concept of saturation. You can use that as a technique. You can say our size will be determined by the concept of saturation. And you can go and look up that term. Data collection instruments. So what is going to be used? For quantitative, it's generally group administered or individually administered questionnaires or surveys, which could be postal, email, telephone, or face-to-face. For, what information was used to develop these instruments is important. So each construct you've got, so if you've got, or scale, customer satisfaction, trust, credibility, can you make up the Likert scale questions for those? No, you need to get it from other research, and you need to in-text reference that you took that from these, or you adapted it from these studies. So I've had a doctorate student recently that just made up their own, and he failed. He has to redo his thesis. And I had to spend days doing the stats, and now I've given it back to him and said, right, I've created the constructs through factor analysis. Now you have to find literature to justify these. But usually you don't do it that way. You first find the constructs and you reference it. Then you test it. Discuss the reliability and validity. So reliability is measured by Kromberg alpha. Have any of you heard of that? And composite reliability. And validity is measured by discriminant and convergent reliability. I've had students that collected 3,000 questionnaires online, and I went to go and do the reliability and validity, and there was 0. Nothing. So I said, sorry, you've got to chuck away those 3,000 questionnaires and can't use it. He did another 1,000 online, same results. Then we collected physically perfect reliability, perfect validity. So my theory is that when you collect data using online techniques, people fill them out differently compared to when they do it face to face. So be careful how you, if your stats come out not reliability and validity, you chuck them away. If it's 10,000 and it's not reliable, you chuck it away. So it's important that you use the right construct. This is for quantitative research. So when you are testing Likert scale, when you have Likert scale questions, this is what I'm referring to. So it's important that you get scales from research that were previously validated. Because if not, you could be wasting your time. And in 2 instances, it wasn't that his construct weren't right, it was how he collected it. I don't know what happened there, but anyway. So use previously validated questionnaire instruments. Get permission from these people. Email them their address and say, look here, I'm doing and they'll always say yes. No one's ever said no. Say, I've taken your constructs from this article. Can I use it in my research? I get every day people asking me permission to use my instruments. I say, yeah, but knock yourself out, because they're going to in-text reference you then. Then it's another citation for me, because that's what it's about, academics getting citations. Getting people to use your research. Data collection and field work. So how will the field be accessed? Are you going to use field workers, or are you going to collect it yourself? Right? You can do it telephonically, but then you can't do as many. You can do it face-to-face. Generally, my students do group administrated. They'll go to a school or something, and obviously you need to get ethics clearance and permission. And they collect it in mass. That's how they get such big numbers. They don't go to 4,000 different people. Okay, they collect it in groups. Will the data be telephonic, observational? Define the processes. Why is it relevant? Reference. So how? Explain how you're going to collect the data. Why are you going to collect it that way? You can say, I don't have money, so I'm just going to do CPUT students. You know, because I'm a student, I can't say that. You know, but there'll be other people that said that because of cost. So then your in-text reference in. As the following people also said cost was a factor. Every textbook will say cost is a factor. Then your in-text reference the textbooks. Are you with me? So use that. Data coding analysis. So how will the data be captured? How will it be coded? What program will be used? So the Atlas TI is used for qualitative studies. SPS and AMOS is used for quantitative. Usually you start with descriptive stats via pictures and tables, and then thereafterwards you move on to more complex stats. Describe and justify the selection of your data analysis. So why did you analyze it like this? Quantitative things you could include are means, median, standard deviations, confidence intervals, ANOVA, t-test, chi-squared, post-hoc test, etc., structural equation modeling. So these are the things that you could use. Qualitative, you use content analysis, hermeneutics, conversational, discourse, narrative analysis. So explain why you're using these different techniques, okay? Consider how they'll help you respond to your research questions. So those are what you can write under data coding and analysis. Okay, we're nearly there, guys. A few more slides. Demarcation or delimitations or delimitations are the same thing. Are they the same as limitations? No, they're different. These are which aspects of your given search area will be targeted and why these areas were selected. So they show you the boundaries of your research. They're not limitations, they're boundaries. So only research students will be used, not all millennials. So explain why. Why did you just use university students and not everyone else? Because you can say, I couldn't get permission, costs, access, etc. Limited to the Cape Town region. Why not the whole of South Africa? So you can say, well, I'm looking at, you can say future research could consider the whole South Africa, but I don't have access. Only mobile shopping apps will be used. Why not all other mobile shopping technology? Again, you've got to, you see, you said those are just examples. You are limiting what your research focuses on. So you take your title and you're now saying, I'm only doing this section, and this section. And you need to justify with references. It might also be helpful to indicate what will not be covered by your research as well in this section. So that's what that delimitations is about. Then ethical considerations, you must state how will you address these. You must go through CPUT's ethics committee before your proposal goes on to HTC Digital. They are very stringent on that process. Informed consent, you need to talk about that. Privacy or confidentiality, honesty and professionalism. SAMRA, that's a South African Marketing Research Association Code of Conduct. You can go and have a look at that. What do all these things mean? Define each reference and apply to your research. So these are just things you can look up in textbooks and online, define them, and yeah. I will email this PowerPoint presentation to you, by the way, and the videos will be put on YouTube. So you can hear me speaking about this as well, if you're brave enough to listen to me a second time around. A lot of my BTech students say, you know, I was just listening to your video and I just fell asleep, you know. They said it's the best sleeping tablet they've ever taken, because I record my classes, you see, all my classes. So they really say, oh, you say, you just put me to sleep, it's so good. Openly. So yeah, if you want to go to sleep at night, and then what's even funnier is when they graduate, and I meet the parents and say, oh, that's the voice, because they're hearing this voice all the time in their home, and they're wondering now, they want to see the face to the voice. And they go, oh, I know you so well, I hear you every day. So anyway, So the outline of the thesis, so now you need to break it down to the different chapters of your thesis in this proposal. So you would say chapter 1 is the introduction and background, chapter 2, but you could have 2 or 3 literature review chapters. It just depends on how your thesis is put together. Your research methodology is usually chapter 3, chapter 4 results and finding, chapter 5 discussion analysis, chapter 6 conclusions and recommendations. This is the least number of chapters you should have. Okay, but you could have more literature review chapters. My doctorate thesis, for example, was done by publication, so I had each journal article got published was a chapter, so I had 10 chapters in mine. But it just depends on, but the least number you should have is 6. Research plan, so I think I put an example here. It's useful to put together a plan to show the major activities. You can use a Gantt chart. They should be realistic. So all my students, when they come to me, we're going to be done in 2 years. I'm saying that's what you think. Rather put a long period of time, even on HTC Digital, rather put 5 years' time. So if you finish 3 years earlier, that's okay. But don't say I'm going to finish next year, because you can, at the FHDC, we laugh. People said they were going to finish in 2016, and they're still busy with their proposal. So rather put the maximum date on, say, 5 years. And if you finish in 2 years, great. But if you finish in 5 years, then at least we're not laughing at you in the FHDC committee. And it's a problem. It creates problems later on. So always rather just put the long term, and if you finish earlier, great. So that's just a tip. So here's an example, of one of my students, and my example is a bit different, the order to others, I must say. So acceptance of proposal 20th March 20. Acceptance of ethics the next month. Acceptance of faculty research. Set up fieldwork. See, my students are doing fieldwork and then they're just updating their chapters. Why? Because in the proposal, I've made them do those chapters already. That's why mine's funny, whereas most people say approval, then they'll go chapter 2, 3, 4, 5. You always do chapter 1 last, by the way. Chapter 1 in your thesis is your background to your research problem statement, objectives. You always do it last. So once you finish the thesis, you then do chapter 1, you redo it. Okay, it won't be the same as your proposal because you would have found a lot more literature by then. So it's very important to take that. So my students, after they're done with ethics, they do the fieldwork because they've already done the other chapters in their proposal, because I make them, as I say, do it big. And then they just need to update their chapters, submit grammarian changes, submission for examination, and then hopefully they graduate. And you put the year. So these people expect to graduate 2022. They're realistic. They're saying 3 years' time, be realistic. Don't select the date too, close. Now, the last section is limitations. Now, this is different from delimitations is the boundary of the research. Limitations is hindrances, problems of your research. So that may influence. So what factors compromise your research plan? What are the possible limitations to achieving the agenda? It could be methodology, coverage, generalization. So if you're using student population, can you generalize? No, because students are not representative. Risk to your credibility. Most journal articles also provide a list of limitations. So you can have a look at each journal article as limitations. You would have looked for gaps here. So you can say limitations, we went to these respondents and they filled out the question, they didn't fill out the questionnaires correctly. Or, we did data analysis and there was no validity, so we had to recollect. Are those limitations? Yes, we went to this school and they wouldn't give us permission. So those are the type of things that you would say in limitations. Example, the study was conducted in a developing country where M-commerce is not broadly used. So therefore you may have difference to access. A quantitative study was used to provide cross-sectional, whereas longitudinal studies or qualitative will provide greater depth. So that's what you can say. I'm using quantitative, but to get better depth, you could use qualitative. Cross-analysis of demographic factors would provide useful. So if you did research theses and you didn't do cross-analysis, then you could say, and those are just examples, or only the millennial cohort was looked at. So you only looked at millennials, but what about the other age groups? Those are other type of limitations of your research that you could mention. And then your reference list only include the sources that were cited in your text. Do you all know the difference between a bibliography and a reference list? So bibliography is everything you looked at. A reference list is only those sources that you in-text reference or cited. And what I do is, once I'm finished with a piece of work or article or proposal, then I print out the reference list, and online I tick off each source that it matches. And then usually you find one or two in your reference list that weren't cited, I delete. And then you find one or two that you did not put in your references, then I put that there. So that's a good tactic. Print out the reference list, and then on the computer screen you tick that everyone accounts for. Because if I find sources that either way were not in-text referenced or were not in your reference list, then I throw it back at you and say, you know, and my BTEC students as well, I kill them at this because I always check, is there full correspondence? So please make sure that happens. Reference lists are also in alphabetical order. Refer to the Harvard for Beginners or the Research Methodology Citation. I've given you the link there. I'm not doing referencing, but I will put some videos on referencing on as well on YouTube for you, and I'll send you those links. Okay. And then lastly, the last part of the proposal is the summary, a 250-word summary. Not a 2.5-page summary, which is 1,000 words. 250 words is not a lot. And you use these subheadings: problem statement, aims and objective, research method, research ethics, significance. No new content should be provided. So there's no in-text referencing in this. You just summarize in your own words. And yeah, no textual references, no new content. So there shouldn't be information in the summary that's not in your proposal. It should just be summarizing what is in your proposal without in-text references. 250 words. And that's that. The YouTube link, before I email this to you, I'll upload it and I'll include the YouTube links at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. And I just want to stop recording.